Hi, everybody. This is Michael Brune. I'm the Executive Director of the Sierra Club, and welcome to our Google Hangout. We're here today to talk about the Centennial celebration of the National Park Service and what it means for the Sierra Club, what it means for our country, and what it means for the future of conservation and outdoor recreation. We have an amazing list of guests to hear from today. And we'll also have some time for your questions, your comments, your ideas. So please stay on the line and stay on the screen. So the Sierra Club was basically founded as an outdoor adventure organization. As you know, we were founded by John Muir almost 124 years ago. The basic idea that he had was that if you get people out into nature, along the crest of the Sierra, inside Yosemite Valley, you give people an opportunity to explore and enjoy the planet, they are going to be committed and dedicated and relentless in advocating for the protection of wild places and the planet in general. And that's how the Sierra Club was started. For more than 100 years, we have been leading people into nature, running thousands of outings every year, bringing people together to celebrate and to explore and enjoy the wonders that is our national park system and our broadened mosaic of protected lands, public lands across the United States. One of the interesting things about the Sierra Club is that our motto used to be to explore, enjoy, protect, and render accessible wild places of our worlds. And that last piece, render accessible, is a very big part of who the Sierra Club was. If you were to go back and to look at old minutes, old board minutes, old Sierra Club bulletins in the late 20s and 30s, to the 40s and early 50s, you would find great debates and huge advocacy campaigns designed to find ways to build more accessibility into our national park system, but also other protected areas. There were Sierra Club campaigns to build more roads, to build more lodges, and to create more infrastructure in order to help open up and to make more accessible some of our parks and wilderness parks across the country. And then there was a period for several decades where we realized that we had created enough infrastructure. The belief was that we created enough infrastructure, and there must be a premium placed on the protection, certainly of our national parks, but also our wilderness areas, to keep them these places as they were originally created, or as close to it as possible. And so now, as we face as we celebrate the centennial of the National Park Service, we have an opportunity to do two things. One is to celebrate this, because not only, America is blessed. We are lucky to be living in a country with such amazing biological, natural, and cultural places across the country. National Park Service, but also there's a broad array of public lands that are held in common trust, which give us so much wealth and opportunities to explore, enjoy, and protect. But we also, as we are celebrating the 100-year anniversary of the National Park Service, we also have an opportunity to recommit and rededicate ourselves to the purpose of getting more people outside. And the idea of rendering accessible our public lands is as alive today and as important today as it was 50, 60, 70 years ago. So the Sierra Club, we have made a particular focus, particularly over the last couple of years, to find ways to increase the accessibility of our public lands. Yet just yesterday we announced $100,000 in grants, which is the start of many more grants to come to help build trails and to help find ways to make sure that people have access to nature nearby, but also opportunities to explore our national park system and other public lands across the country. This is an important part of who the Sierra Club is, and it's an important part of who we'll be for years to come. So I just wanted to reflect a little bit on our history and how we have come full circle as an organization, but we remain true to our original purpose, to explore, enjoy, and protect nature, and to make sure that every American, everybody who's in this country, has an opportunity to get outside and to have an amazing experience. And you're going to have an amazing experience for the next half hour as you hear from some of our speakers. I'm going to introduce all of them, and then we'll flow from one to the next. So up first, we have Director John Jarvis, who is, if you haven't heard him speak, if you haven't followed his life story, if you're not watching his leadership at the National Park Service, then you're in for a treat, because this man is an American hero. He has one of the best jobs in the country, managing the National Park Service. But he also has an enormous responsibility, and he's meeting that responsibility with a lot of grace and humility and creativity. So, John, we're lucky to have you on this hangout. We also have the indomitable, the irrepressible, the inspirational Brune, who is the founder and CEO of Outdoor Afro. Rue and I have spent a bunch of time in deep in the wilds of the Arctic, up near the Arctic Circle, up near the Arctic Ocean. We have spent time deep in the bowels of the U.S. government. We have spent time shaking hands, pressing the flesh, sending emails around. We have done everything it takes to be an outdoor explorer in the 21st century. Outdoor Afro is an amazing organization that works to reconnect African Americans to nature through outdoor experiences. We also have Jose Gonzalez, who is a dynamic and emerging young leader of the environmental conservation movement. You might know him because he is the founder and leader of Latino Outdoors. You might know him because he is an emerging celebrity and is part of the Green 50 top leaders in the country. But he is also another inspirational figure who is weaving together greater connectivity in our movement. And then finally, we have Allison Chin, who is the past president of the Sierra Club, who is a current board member of the Sierra Club, who has been leading outings for the Sierra Club since the late 80s. And she holds a very special place in my heart because she's the woman who hired me to the Sierra Club about 6 years ago. So I have to be on my best behavior with her on this call. I am happy to introduce John, but just also to say that I have to step off at the bottom of the hour. So if you have questions, any of your difficult questions, we will save them for Allison to answer, and any of your easier questions, I'll get back to you on Twitter. But now, without further ado, John Jarvis, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Michael, and it's a real honor to be here with this incredible panel. All of them I know well and have enormous respect for, so I think this is going to be a lot of fun. Let me kind of launch into my thoughts around the Centennial, the opportunity that the 100th anniversary of the National Park Service really presents. Not just for the National Park Service. It'd be way too parochial if we thought it was all about us. It's really, in my mind, about the nation. It's about the places that we manage, the programs that we provide to communities across the country to sort of connect and build relevancy with the next generation so that they take on the mantle of responsibility for this, I think as Michael, you indicated, this incredible wealth we have in this nation, but also to use that knowledge to become inspired to help the nation live up to our high ideals. As a nation, we, I believe, are unique in many ways of the not yet achieved but very high ideals articulated in the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, and many of the subsequent laws about who we are as a people. And in these sort of troubling political times, there's a lot that divides us as a nation, and I think that the national parks are something that can unite us as a nation. But coming into this with 40 years in the National Park Service, I clearly understand that the Park Service needs to do its own work to build that connection, to build that relevancy. So we set, going into the Centennial, a very specific goal around connecting with and creating the next generation of park visitors, of supporters and advocates, and in doing so, build this depth of relevancy for the organization, but also for the ideas and values for which we represent. So let me just click off a number of things that we have underway, and they all have depth to them. I'll be skipping across the tops of abstraction to a certain degree. But sort of one of the first things we did is we were entering into the sesquicentennial of the Civil War. And so we consciously decided to reframe the way the Civil War is discussed, the way it's taught, the way it's remembered, that it was about slavery, not about states' rights. And so we framed our interpretation and our all of our events around building relevancy into how important the Civil War was to this nation and its freeing of enslaved over 4 million enslaved people, and how that story transitioned right into the civil rights movement, and in that the National Park Service manages and protects and interprets the civil rights, many of the civil rights sites like Selma to Montgomery or Ebenezer Baptist Church or the Tuskegee Airmen sites. We moved right into that story as well to elevate the story of civil rights in the nation. And we used those sites to bring young people in particular to experience the civil rights movement, but make it relevant to issues in Ferguson, Missouri, or Little Rock, Arkansas, that are happening right now across our nation, and connecting the stories of the civil rights movement to their own personal experiences. Other things we've done is we've launched a series of theme studies to deepen the Park Service's relevancy by telling a more complete story. So we launched theme studies for Asian American Pacific Islanders, for women, for Latinos, and for LGBT. All of those with intent to create new sites that could either be managed by the National Park Service. The Cesar Chavez National Monument is a perfect example that President Obama designated at the end of his first term as a site that we felt was incredibly important to tell and to protect. But other sites, Honouliuli and on the island of Oahu is another one of the camps that imprisoned Japanese American citizens during World War II as well. And other National Historic Landmarks like the murals of Diego Rivera in Detroit. So these theme studies are resulting in both potential new national parks as well as new National Historic Landmarks as well. We launched our urban agenda, and we picked specific cities where we placed employees to work at the community level, cities that like Detroit or Richmond, California, where we felt that we could help with our capacities to help those cities find open space, create green space, create new parks and access to river and to waterways, and to help them tell their own historical and cultural stories as well. We launched the EKIP, the Every Kid in a Park program, with target market towards fourth graders and particularly Title I schools to get kids to have outdoor experiences in parks and public lands. And we're still working on how we're going to execute all of that this year, and hopefully 12 years in a row, so that we get every kid in the nation to have an outdoor experience as well. And of course, we've been working with many youth-serving organizations, a lot of the traditionals, but new ones as well, that helping them find a way to work directly with not only the National Park Service, but our other public land agencies to help us have fantastic experiences for young people, and work that like Rue has done and Jose to connect young people into these youth corps, into our parks and public lands as well. And I think a couple of other things I just want to mention. The Park Service has been very out front in talking about climate change, about adaptation, about education around climate change. And I think this also builds relevancy into the next generation, that we are willing to step up and speak openly and honestly about an issue that will face particularly the next generation for their entire lives. So the Centennial is a celebration, and we are going to celebrate it pretty wildly and crazily throughout 2016. But there is a deeper goal here about the second century of stewardship of these places as well. So Thank you for bringing this together, and I'm going to toss the ball to the incredible Brune.
Wow, thank you so much. I feel very honored to be a part of the conversation. I'm getting a little bit of feedback, unfortunately. Let me just adjust my volume here. I'm so excited to be on this call. I feel like I'm on a call with friends. It's almost like you're sitting around the dining room table and we're talking about something that we all feel very passionate about and that has the potential to be transformative for all Americans. So my name is Brune, and I'm the founder and CEO of Outdoor Afro, where Black people and nature meet. It's a focused conversation, but everyone's welcome to join us. And we're so proud to do this work, linking arms with outdoor retail partners like REI and Clean Canteen and Keen Shoes, but also our agency partners like the National Parks and the Sierra Club have really helped to inform our work in some really significant ways. I began my journey falling in love with the outdoors because of my parents. My parents had a farm in Northern California that taught me almost everything that I love today about nature, such as fishing and riding my bike on country roads and seeing stars at night that I wasn't able to see back home in Oakland. So it was truly my laboratory. But one of the things that my parents instilled in me is not only a love of nature, but also a love of community in nature. So several years go by, and I just took this passion of mine for granted. And when asked by a mentor what was really important to me, I just decided that I wanted to try to find ways to reconnect more people who look like me in outdoor experiences, especially when I found myself in more remote outdoor experiences away from the city. And I didn't see a lot of people who looked like me, and I wanted to do something about it. So Outdoor Afro was born in social media. We put together a very simple blog and a Facebook page and began having a conversation that resonated with so many people who said, hey, I love nature too. And I realized that all the people who thought that they were the only ones were actually quite numerous when you put us all together. So we had this chance to not only connect people to one another around a common interest, but also an opportunity to help shift the visual representation of who gets outdoors. So we've been very deliberate with Outdoor Afro to tell a new narrative and to build on Director Jarvis's comments about, about telling a story that connects with people. That is exactly what Outdoor Afro has tried to do in all of our activities. So we've grown up from that online conversation, and we are now a network of everyday men and women. I call them the butcher, the baker, the candlestick maker. We've got 60 leaders around the country hailing from 30 states this year who are engaging about 10,000 people. And we're connecting with people close to home. And a lot of people don't realize we've got over 400 parks. And many of those parks, those national parks, are in places right where people live in urban areas. And it's been really a joy to help us connect African American history. The parks are really a history of all of us. And when you tell the story of Harriet Tubman or John Harris out in Golden Gate National Recreation Area, it activates those places in a whole different way. People feel a sense of belonging and connectedness. And so that is what we're really focused on with Outdoor Afro today. It's helping people feel connected not only to these places that we celebrate, but also to one another. And, of course, speaking to the issues of the day around civil rights, those stories are so important to tell. And I've also found that nature is something we need for healing. And so one of the things that we've done, and in partnership with the Sierra Club, is we've launched a series of healing hikes as an alternative way for people to feel connected and to really soothe a lot of what ails us, that often we don't have the right outlet to release our stress and our concerns, but also give us a platform to talk and listen to each other. And so I really thank the Sierra Club for all the ways that we've been able to learn from each other. They've been leading trips for so many years, and there's so many things we've learned about how to do that. And I just want to, continue to champion ways that we can support leadership. It's great to get kids out, especially from low-income areas who wouldn't otherwise have the opportunity. But we're thinking about the sustainability of that engagement. That is why I'm so glad that Every Kid in a Park is not only connecting with those youth, but it's also allowing their caregivers to have free entry into the park, as well as their teachers. And so I believe that a multi-generational approach is essential, because at the end of the day, it's the moms and the dads who have the car, and they make the decision about how money is spent and how time is spent. And guess what? Adults need nature too. And so I really want to support all the ways that we're continuing to develop leadership in ordinary people. My big, hairy, audacious goal is to help restore outdoor leadership and expertise back to the home. And I think that we are on our way through helping lift up leadership in places that we hadn't considered before, telling new stories, using all the available platforms that we have, using digital media that help us in a very inexpensive and nimble way reach out to a broader demographic. These are such exciting times, and I am already jogging and ready to grab the baton and run even further this year, and really imagine an outdoor experience for all people where, people can connect in with their natural resources, their public lands, and especially their national parks in proportion to their population and their opportunity, and it be no big deal. So at this time, I want to pass on the baton to my buddy. This guy is always people are always asking me, do you know Jose Gonzalez? Do you know Jose Gonzalez? And yes, I do. And people have been asking from the very beginning of Outdoor Afro, we have so many demographics and so many different groups, who's speaking to the Latino community? And I am just so proud of the way that Jose has stepped up and is really providing a voice for the Latino community globally. So at this time, Jose, please introduce yourself.
Thank you so much, Rue. First of all, it's a pleasure to be here. Welcome, everybody. Bienvenidos. I'm really excited to be present here as a voice for the community, and obviously not the voice for the community. I'd like to thank the Sierra Club National Park Service for helping set this up. Rue, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to kind of grow with you in this movement, in this space. And of course, the community at large, the team that makes Latino Outdoors happen, our National Director, Graciela Cabello, who's leading so much of this work, and our network of ambassadors across the U.S. as well, and our partners. And that's exciting to say because it's a big responsibility, I think, and as well as an opportunity that we have here as leaders in the movement, but also the community that we seek to support and represent and better connect with our public land and open spaces. The exciting part about the Centennial is that it's a highlight, it's a focus, right? It is a moment in time, but this is not just it. This is the opportunity where collectively and together we get to share and celebrate what the National Park Service and the system is, but also what it was, and just as exciting what it can be for the next 100 years. And what does that also mean in terms of our public lands in general? That if they are truly public lands, then we, the public, have the privilege and the opportunity to be there, to be present, as well as the responsibility to be stewards, knowing that the demographics are changing. I am an example of that. I am a first-generation immigrant to the United States. I was born in Mexico. So my outdoor experiences starts there with my family, with my grandparents out tending to his crops. And then coming to the U.S. and growing up in California, continuing an agriculture experience that was very different than how I grew up those first 9 years old. But then knowing that growing up in the Central Valley of California, there was a variety of outdoor places so close that I didn't get to experience except little by little. So when I saw my first connection to the national parks, where it was the sequoias and the redwoods, the majestic awesomeness that just struck me with, and thinking about, as I often say, the magical realism of these spaces, and how do we all get to be here? Also seeing a bit of the disparity, beginning to understand some of the inequity of how some of our communities get to access these places, and then also the opportunity. Then that means, what is this going to look like in 100 years? A park boundary may or may not change, but the stories of how we understand these places is extremely powerful, as I think all of our guests have seen here. Knowing that the management of these public lands, the responsibility and the celebration is an active component. These parks are not static. The way that we talk about them are not static, just as the communities that have been accessing them are not static. So if all of this isn't changed, we have an active involvement to highlight and bring out the stories of the outdoor places, but also the historic monuments. Because, as has been shared, is the parks are they're one slice of our public lands. We also have our wildlife refuges, our other conservation areas with the Forest Service, with the Bureau of Land Management. All of these are our responsibility, as well as our work to make sure that they're accessible for everybody. And that's important because of the work, especially that I'll speak for myself, but also with Brune, that it's a focused conversation, because we are approaching at this from equity. We all are going for the equality of this conservation table, but we have to understand that we put in extra work because of the equity work required, so that all communities have this access point. And so it's important to have that conversation, to know that we bring different perspectives to how we see Yosemite, to how we see the Statue of Liberty, to how we see the National Mall, to how we see even the Cesar Chavez National Monument. That's not a Latino park. That's a park for everybody. So we can all engage in that conversation, just like we can all engage in the conversation on Yellowstone. So I want to close because that's my vision for the public lands, that I, as a first generation immigrant to this country, bilingual, first in my family to go to college, oldest of 8 siblings, we speak Spanish at home. But for me, I am very much I see myself as an ambicultural leader. I have at least 2 cultures, an outdoor culture, a conservation, environmental culture, but also a cultural identity deeply rooted in my Latino, Chicano, Mexican heritage roots. And I can leverage both of those, and that makes us powerful, because it allows us to speak to a breadth of communities and help to connect, both for the comfortable and the uncomfortable storytelling, but that it's necessary because our public lands, the National Park Service, are the story of this country. So we need to be able to engage in the breadth of it. So that's why I'm excited to be here. That's why I'm passionate about this, and that's why, for me, it's so exciting to be part of a community that drives this. And I would like to pass it on to Allison Chin, I think another representative ambicultural leader. She's with the Sierra Club Board of Directors.
Thank you so much, Jose. And friends, it's good to be here with you. My story has some similarities to what we've heard from others already. I think a large part of why I am here today in my role doing the work that I've undertaken is because of an early relationship and experience with the national parks. I was really fortunate. I'm second generation Chinese American. My dad had this, he immigrated in the late 40s, and part of his American dream was to, include camping with the family. And so he took us to Kings Canyon and Sequoia National Park. Those are indelible memories of recreation, education, exploration, discovery, really learning who I am, and I think one of the things I loved about the park was that I could just be all of me, all of the time, accepted for who I was, at that time. And so I love the national parks and have real fond memories there. And another thing I learned from my parents was to share what we get, share what we love. And so we brought family out to the national parks. At one time it was, the Southern Californians meeting with the Northern Californians in Sequoia Kings Canyon, of course. Then we invited friends and began to spread, our enjoyment and love for the parks there. And one group of friends I brought was from graduate school, which helped me realize that, I took a colleague who was also Chinese American camping for her first time when she was in her 20s. So that was sort of my first awakening to the fact that I'd taken all this for granted. And that not everybody does have the same access because it might not be part of their family or cultural practices. And that's what led me actually to the Sierra Club. And when I did get connected to the Sierra Club first to fight for the protection of public lands, the second was to really think about becoming an outings leader in order to be able to connect people to the outdoors, because you can't fight to protect things you don't know about. And so that was my introduction to an organization that has been a huge part of my life, one where I have made just lifelong friends, leading outings through the Inspiring Connections Outdoors program. It's a program, again, about sharing the outdoors with people who might not have access because it's not part of their cultural upbringing, and so to help expand their worlds, understanding these are lands, whether it's national parks or public lands, these are lands that belong to all of us. Being part of someone else's discovery is a gift far and beyond itself, which I just love, and I've had the pleasure of, being witness to time and time again. I think another part of the Inspiring Connections Outdoors program that I just loved was the value of having the opportunity to mentor or model the way to work across difference, and that difference can be however you define it. With the young people, it can be age, it might be race, it might be culture, it might be profession, it might be interest. I mean, there's just so many ways to think about the ways we connect with one another, and we bridge our differences and interests in the spirit of learning and growing and discovering more about ourselves and more about one another. And I think that's what the park and public lands offer as well, is just another venue for doing more of that self-discovery and more of that really leaning in and learning about one another. So I'm delighted to be here. I think this year with the Centennial on the National Park Services has huge opportunities for me personally. I'm actually looking at the list of parks I haven't visited and thinking about expanding that list and getting to some places that are even nearby. Again, for my family, it was not only the national parks, but the state parks, the local parks. I mean, just getting outdoors. And outdoors can mean something different to everyone, right? For some, you look out your windows and you're surrounded by maybe woods and parklands. And for others, it's going to be more of an urban environment. But just being outdoors and connecting is really an exciting opportunity. So I'm thrilled to be here, and I think with that I'm going to take a look at some of the questions that have been sent over by people who signed up for this hangout, and see what piques folks' interest. The first question I have is for all the panelists, and some of you have answered this already, but if you care to elaborate, when we celebrate the bicentennial of the national parks in another 100 years, what do you hope has changed about the parks and public lands? I'd like to kick us off. Remember to take yourself off mute. Or if Mike, you want to get us going, since we only have you for a couple more minutes.
Sure. Well, first, thanks everybody for your stories, your testimonial. In 100 years, I want to see us. Well, first I have to say I want us living in a climate-safe world. I want to see our National Park Service and all of our public lands being part of a country that is powered by 100% clean energy. We can build a society that is powered with energy that's safe, secure, and sustainable. But as far as the bicentennial of the National Park Service, I think I'm looking for a service that is celebrated by more people and is enjoyed by millions more people, where it is easy to prevent any backlog of maintenance needs because there's a greater value placed on the National Park Service, and it's all of our public lands are enjoyed by a majority of Americans living then. And I wouldn't mind seeing John Jarvis still in office 100 years from now as well. Great job.
I don't think I'm going to live that long. I'm not sure I want to live that long. I'll jump in a little bit because I have actually thought about this a little bit, and that was a great answer, Michael. I think on the environmental side, I hope, and I think this is actually doable, that we live in a country where that the green infrastructure of our nation is managed at the landscape scale, where we have integrated the anchor stores, which are the parks and public lands, the large components of our green infrastructure, are integrated with an urban environment that is high quality as well. So there are green spaces and clean rivers and streams, and every community has parks that are connected and operate with an ecological integrity overlay that actually functions for migratory species, whether they're monarch butterflies or other species that can move across the landscape with people. And so no matter where you live, you have some access to nature, quality nature. And that concept and the parks and public lands, both local, city, state, and national, are supported by and utilized by all people of our nation with complete equity across everyone.
I'll quickly add in something. I agree and echo what's been shared. I think a couple of key things is that idea of sustainability and how in another 100 years for the bicentennial, the parks, specifically the Park Service, but of course all of our public lands, they are sustainable in the way that they are managed, that they are funded, that they are cared for, and that who is caring for them is also a sustainable act. We don't need to continue to have the discussion about a deficiency or thinking that the new generation isn't connected or a diversity of communities aren't connecting. I think for me that's going to be a big celebration. And lastly, in terms of that, the public lands and especially our park system, it's a shared public platform and public good, and that how we care for them and celebrate them is just as valued as understood. And I think for many Americans it is, but I want that to be true across the board, the same way that we think about health and education. These should not be contentious topics in the terms of how they should be available to everybody, because the outdoors and nature provides those same benefits that a school building does, that a hospital does. And so these really should be seen as an integrated system for the wellness of all of our communities. So that's how I want to be celebrating. Well, I don't know if I'm going to be around in 100 years, but I want to make sure that our future supporters and family members and descendants get to celebrate this in the way, and they get to point to the work that we did as making sure that we contributed in that direction.
Yeah, and I'll just jump in really quickly. I think about the stories, but also who's telling the story. And I would really love to see in another 100 years park system staff that reflects the rich tapestry of our country. We have wonderful examples out there today. We have Ranger Betty Soskin here in Richmond, California, and and Ranger Shelton Johnson, who's keeping alive the story of the Buffalo Soldier, some of our park's first park rangers. So I really want to continue to champion ways that we can support diverse leadership and participation, because there's just something about seeing a familiar cultural face or connection, or even how stories are told, that really can make a huge difference in how people can feel an authentic connection to these places. And I also think that we're going to continue to see the conversation evolve from relevancy to resiliency. And I think this speaks to Jose's point and Mike Brune's point. How can we think about our parks as a platform to demonstrate our resiliency as individuals, as communities, and what can we learn from the landscape about those lessons in resiliency. So I'm very much interested in the ways that parks can just have a more everyday way of welcoming people and allowing people to literally find their park and find the parks that speak to them and that they're actively using them in whatever ways they can to be resilient and sustainable.
Great. Thank you, everyone. I've got a question here for Director Jarvis. How does President Obama's Every Kid in a Park initiative relate to the Centennial? And how can I participate in the program if I don't have a fourth grader?
Well, you can always borrow one. The EKIP program, just a little bit of history. We target marketed the Find Your Park campaign, the Centennial campaign, towards the millennial generation. That's sort of 18 to 35, more urban, more technologically connected, and really the next generation that is going to assume all the responsibilities that we currently have for our advocacy groups, for our parks and public lands, for our political leadership in the nation. And so they're an important sector, but we didn't want to ignore our the next incoming generation. And we already have a lot of great programs out there focused on kids in sort of that elementary age. There's some fantastic overnight programs run by like Nature Bridge or the North Cascades Institute and others that get kids into parks. But it was not a focused effort. So the EKIP program gives us a very specific focus on fourth graders. The fourth grader cohort was chosen very specifically, specifically because fourth graders are often still in homeroom in most public schools. Fourth grade is often the period that they study their state's history, and according to the research, fourth graders will still listen to an adult, and are still have that sort of impressionable awe when they see something in the outdoors. And so they're also a manageable sort of age and cohort. So we targeted the EKIP to the fourth graders and granted this pass, which is, I think Rue indicated, it goes in their backpack, goes home, and then their caregivers, whoever they may be, can accompany them to any park or public land for a year. And we've also built some educational component around this as well. I have to say we're still in the first year sort of formative aspects of this and working out the details. As I mentioned, our goal is to really refine it through this year and get it institutionalized with the support of all our parks and public land agencies, so that we do this year after year after year, and that it begins to be built into the expectations of fourth grade. So if you have a third grader, they should be anticipating that they get to go next year. if you're a grandparent or an aunt or an uncle with a fourth grader in the family, you got to get them in the program so that they can bring you to the parks as well. And there are plenty of other programs for fifth graders, sixth graders, and second graders and others out there as well. We're not ignoring them. So EKIP is just a focus on that one particular cohort. But I think getting kids into parks, into any type of green space, we already know that it activates a lot of things that can set them on a course to a healthy lifestyle. We know that kids that play in the outdoors and learn to ride a bike and do water sports, any of that kind of stuff, they will do for the rest of their lives. So it really sets them on a great path for themselves and for their families in the future as well. So we look at it as an investment, not an expense.
Great, thank you. Thank you so much. Let's see, we have here for Brune and Jose. What do you believe are the top 2 objectives institutions like the National Park Service and Sierra Club can do to help work with you side by side?
Oh, there we go. Are we back?
Okay. Yeah, can you hear me now?
I can hear you, Allison. Yes.
Okay, great. Yeah, so what do you believe are top 2 objectives organizations, institutions like the National Park Service and the Sierra Club can do to help you side by side to create a more inclusive environment for communities that not traditionally seen in our parks? So how can we help you specifically?
Yeah, well, I'm really thrilled about the ways that we've already gone down the path in so many different areas of our organization. So what people don't see day to day are all the many phone calls, all the many trainings that we've done. Outdoor Afro leadership has been greatly informed by National Park leadership and the Sierra Club's leadership. Mel McInnes, linked arms with me from the very beginning and really helped us to, learn from you all about what effective outdoor leadership could look like. And we've had a chance to adapt it and make it, relevant for our demographic. But I think it's been really important for us to have those partnerships that are not transactional, but are really working together to think about systems, to think about leadership in new ways. Who is a leader? Who can become a leader? And helping us as Outdoor Afro broaden that perspective of who can lead in the outdoors. Again, kids are very, very important in this conversation. But when they go home, I want to know that they can come back. And so I think the leadership piece and the multi-generational focus that we have been able to build on together has been really key, and I'm grateful for that, and I'm looking forward to more.
Thank you. I would quickly add similar in terms of really looking at the institutional change and that we're here to help each other. That I think that's a key thing about understanding that the work that it requires. So for me, it's really about being intentional, inviting and institutionalizing some of that work and how we're opening pathways for each other. I think that's really, really critical. This isn't about, I think, organizations like ourselves to simply do the work of the Park Service or expect the Park Service to do things for us that we know we bring value to this work. So understanding that there's a lot of expertise and knowledge and experience within the Park Service that can help inform our work, and likewise, that we bring a lot of value to the table, and that has to be recognized and understood and appreciated, and really seen how does this help us change, because that's the key thing. Things will change. They have to change. To address some of the diversity questions and concerns with staffing within the Park Service, we want to help. We want to say that we have relationships, as Ruth said. We have certain cultural markers that helps us be able to work in spaces that can help the Park Service, and vice versa. So if we are working with the Park Service to have them be more present and welcome and understanding of, like, on the ground with specific neighborhoods in the barrio, in a specific city, that's similar in terms of how if we're walking the halls of the Department of Interior, we're asking for that help in navigating that space too. And so that's what I'm talking about, being able to help and support each other, because it's about really supporting each other from the interlap of that cultural space, and help each other out, grow from there.
Thank you.
Allison, can I?
Yes.
Yeah.
Please.
I think, when I look across the spectrum of the Sierra Club and the other sort of classical conservation communities that are out there, and then in my own leadership in the National Park Service, and I also would add in the preservation community, it is obvious that it isn't very diverse. It tends to represent sort of my demographic, as one individual said, the silverbacks of the movement. When I was at that Inspiring Next Generation conference out at NCTC a few months ago, a young woman, I think, nailed it when she said, Director Jarvis, we appreciate all that you're doing to inspire the next generation, but what are you doing to empower those of us that are already inspired? And that there needs to be a concerted intergenerational handoff of the leadership of the environmental movement, the preservation movement, of the outdoors movement, all of that, and that my generation needs to, on one hand, be on a second, is to not expect they do it my way, the way that I experienced it, but to empower, like these two extraordinary leaders we have on the panel here, with the tools and support and networking and in a way that they can move, and these two have, but others quickly into this leadership role. And it won't be the same as we did it, and that's good. That's a good thing in many ways. So I think the conservation community has to step up to this responsibility that we need to do. We need to let go, but not just do a, here, take it, not a baton, but a transfer of empowerment to the next generation. That's my thoughts on this.
Great, thank you all. I think that's really beautiful. I've certainly heard sort of the themes of investing in the next generation of leaders who are here now and ready and really willing to take it and run with it. And so some of it is having leaders, be prepared to step back and really appreciate and enable and empower that. So I think that's beautiful. I have here's a question for me. Someone writes, I'm in Tucson and we have very few national parks close by. To mark the celebration, where can we plan an anniversary event? National Forest Service, Bureau of Land Management. So a couple things I can offer for that. I know that for Sierra Club, we have Sierra Club's 100 outings to celebrate the centennial, and that can take place on any type of public land. We're ensuring that, all kids and communities can experience the hours will often mean that we need to make sure that they have access to nearby nature, and that we need to celebrate close to home parks, public spaces as well. I also know, and Director Jarvis, you mentioned this earlier, the Find Our Park it's a great site that helps you find, share, and support park and public lands spaces by state, zip code, or interest. And I actually was roaming around there the other day, just finding a wealth of opportunities nearby my home here in Virginia as well. So I think those are a couple of resources, again, not limited to national parks, but really thinking about all the public lands that are around. So I encourage you to hop on that side, look around for places to get involved.
Yeah,
I've got a...
I might jump in
Yes.
there.
Yes.
You know, I think the question in that they're in Tucson, which is surrounded by Saguaro National Park,
Absolutely.
you know, right adjacent to the city, sort of exemplifies the fact that a lot of people don't know how close parks really are. And for one reason or the other, don't know that there are parks near to home and public lands as well. And, you know, Tucson is immediately adjacent to a spectacular national park. And so huge opportunity there.
Thank you. Yes, and an array of offerings from, you know, recreational areas to cultural centers, monuments, parks. Again, just lots to take advantage of. I am actually just noticing that we're nearing the end of our time, so I do want to give folks a chance maybe to share some brief closing remarks. Yeah, I'll open it up. Brune, start us off.
Oh, you know what? I just came back. My was down. Can you please repeat the question?
Okay, sure. I was just noticing that we have like 5 minutes left on the Hangout, so I thought I'd, you know, give us each a chance to have a, you know, a shot at some closing remarks.
Well, I think that you know, we've touched on so many rich areas that we can activate right now. I think we have been in conversation. It started for me back with the America's Great Outdoors Initiative back in 2010 when President Obama signed an historic memorandum to help us down this path that we're on right now. And a lot of work has happened, and there's a lot that we can celebrate. But I want to impress upon us all, and I think the Centennial is a wonderful cue for us, is that it's time to act. It's time for us to take more risks, to link arms with someone new. Outdoor Afro and Latino Outdoors are just two organizations among many, many organizations out there. The faith community, for instance, definitely has a part in this conversation. And so I want to invite us all to act, to seek out different partners, and I absolutely want to echo Jose's comments about really seeing the assets in communities. You know, moving away from serving and more toward relating. And I think that that will help us achieve the shift that will make our parks a more relevant connection for more Americans. And thank you so much for having me in this conversation today.
Thank you, Rue. Director Jarvis?
Sure. Again, thank you, all of you. You're inspirational to me for sure, and I hope to all the others that are out there that took this advantage of this opportunity to listen in and think about what they can do as well. This is the Centennial year, and we built a platform of Find Your Park. We've launched all these major initiatives. We have incredible partnerships out there. There are event calendars, and every park is doing something. And, you know, we didn't really get any significant new money. We got a little bit of money out of Congress, but what I did ask is every park in the system to think about what they were already doing and shift it appropriately to the Centennial goal. That to utilize this moment in time to really deeply connect with the next generation. And we've done this before, but not for a long time. We did it in the returning World War II veterans very successfully in the 50s and 60s. And the net result was we changed the country in terms of we think about the environment, all the major environmental laws came out of that period. All the preservation laws came out of that period. And so this is another one of those moments in time when if we deeply connect to this next generation and they find themselves and they become empowered and passionate about these places and what they stand for and for themselves as a nation, I think we will see a deepening, a lag effect into the next century that will benefit community. It will benefit us as a people. It will benefit our understanding of each other and respect for each other, and help us live up to this nation of ideals.
Thank you. Jose.
All right, I'll try to be pithy in the sense that there are many ways to find your park, and every kid deserves an opportunity to be in a park. And for public lands to be truly public, we all have that responsibility and opportunity to be there. And whether it's nearby nature, and it's land and water conservation fund that help protect that neighborhood park or set that up, or it's a faraway place like the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, they belong to all of us. And we need to support each other in making sure we have that strong relationship to these spaces, regardless of how often or how close or far away that they are, because we're invested in this as a community and as a country, as a nation, and we have to be able to support each other on that. Y últimamente, para la comunidad hispanohablante, una oportunidad y una responsabilidad que encuentren su parque, están invitados, por favor, pregunten, díganos y sepan que estamos aquí a su servicio. So I wanted to share that because regardless of where we are, where we're starting from, what we bring to the table, this is for all of us. And it's not a question of whether we create these focused conversations to exclude communities, but rather it's an inclusive approach so that we really truly reflect the narrative of this country. We bring our stories, and these stories belong in these open spaces. So I'm excited for the Centennial and the celebration of our public lands this year.
Thank you. And I will join my panelists in really extending an invitation to everyone who's listening to, go find a park. Bring someone, 2, 3 people with you when you do that. And again, Rue, Jose, Director Jarvis, thank you so much for joining us today on this Hangout. Thank you for listening, folks.
Thank you so much.
Gracias.
Gracias.